Kiran, thank you so much for joining
Welcome
the
to
Trulyfit
Trulyfit.
Podcast. Why don't you let my listeners and audience know a little bit more about you, what you do on a day-to-day basis that is involved in the health and fitness and even sports community.
Hi, Steve. Thank you for having me on. Basically, I'm a golf instructor with, in quote, science pretensions. I've been a golfer for 50 years, which kind of dates me. And then I've been teaching golf for 36 years. And being a mere female, as people might say, I always was fascinated by hitting the ball further. And I spent a lot of time trying to figure out ways and means. And then I decided I need an education to do that. So by good luck and my mother's prayers, I won the national championship in India. Then somebody suggested, why don't you become a golf teacher? So I did. I came to the US because in those days, there was nobody that had any sort of education. They just taught by subjectively by how they played or how their students improved or by whatever they learned from the golf magazines of old. So I came to the US. I came to watch famous teachers teach. David Ledbetter and Hank Haney were very generous with their time. And then I decided this is not enough. I need to go to grad school. Luckily, I had a undergrad degree in physics and math. So I went to grad school, did a master's from a chiropractic school, Logan University in St. Louis, Missouri. And the master's was in sports science and nutrition. And then I said, I did every single subject except biomechanics. And it was always understood by everyone in sports that biomechanics is the thing to study. So I went to a PhD program where they did more research than anyone else in golf. It was called Texas Women's University, and I studied biomechanics there. And then I came full circle and realized it's mostly about anatomy, while there's a little bit of motor control, how the nervous system controls movement, and biomechanics that you need to know. But if you're busy measuring moment of a force or calculating your center of mass based on your body segments and things like that, you're missing the big picture, which is to be able to analyze movement and improve it from your perspective, maybe more from an injury point of view, but also obviously from a performance perspective, and then efficiency of the movement.
There are a lot of people in the golf industry who claim there's only one swing. Try my swing. Everyone's doing it wrong, right? We have to do it this way. And what's interesting is everybody that I work with is a little bit anatomically different, right? There's some variance, right? Is there a ratio between your arms and legs? Is it the way your femurs are, placed? Is it the way your arms hang naturally? There's so much talked about in golf from like an anatomical perspective. What I would say from like a static look and a static fitting perspective. Can we take anything out of that without looking at somebody's swing preferences and their age or anything? Can you actually just analyze the body and say, well, you're probably not best suited to do A or B and better doing X or Y or Z?
So what I've done is a slightly different approach. I start with reverse engineering what you want at impact. Okay. So I look at what do you want the ball to do? And then based on that, how should the club be delivered to the ball to perform as it needs to perform? Where should your arms be to deliver the club? And why should your body and arms be at the top of your backswing to deliver the correct downswing that you need? But from what you're asking, you basically need to understand that whatever our difference is, you may be a tall male, I may be a short female, I'm much older, you're younger. What do we have in common? The one thing that we all have in common is the way our joints are designed to move. Not their range of movement, which will be certainly different, but their joint movement capabilities. What do I mean? For example, your elbow is mainly designed to flex and extend on the sagittal plane. If you give it too much of a valgus or varus position, then you're stretching the ligaments and you get injured. So what I also believe is that performance and injury are two sides of the same coin. If you position joints correctly at every stage of your movement, then you are able to get good performance because they're able to be in the flow, especially if they're in the same kinetic chain, like the whole arm. If you misposition your elbow that's in the middle of your wrist and your shoulder, then you're asking for trouble, both with respect to injury and with respect, obviously, to performance then, because the elbow is unhappy right there.
Can you describe, maybe pretend you're talking to a 9-year-old who's never golfed before. Can you describe what we're doing in the golf swing from an anatomical perspective, from a motion perspective. I know we're working through the transverse plane, but like you just mentioned, it's not just what the torso is doing, right? There's so many other joints and things going on. How do you describe it to somebody who maybe is, let's say, a personal trainer, but they're not a golfer?
Right, that's a very good question. So I would say basically you're hitting a ball on the ground with the club. You're moving your arms away from the ball and then towards the ball in the downswing, and then you finish to decelerate the movement, right? Now, which body parts should you move? Should you move your pelvis? Your feet are stuck on the ground, your arms are free to move, and your torso can move to some extent. It's a heavy, slow moving part of the body. So the question is, which body parts should you move and how should you move them? Now, if you look back to the history of golf 500-600 years ago, the shepherds of God, Scotland still made a swing and made some movement of the ball, right? We don't know if they made the perfect movement that they could make, but they somehow did it. So they made some movement of the arms and the body going back and coming through, and somehow they connected by practice and repeating themselves. If the question is that you want to do it to the best of your ability, then you really need to position the body in certain places based on the torso capabilities, meaning from your pelvis to your shoulders. Your head, people don't often talk about, is also an important part to be positioned and moved correctly. And then your arms. And then you have to know that you need to use external forces like the ground. And you need to make the most of the muscles that can give you the power that you need. Is that simple enough?
That's simple enough, right? We describe that. Now we'll take this to the next step, right? And be maybe a little bit, we'll dive in even further, is that there is power in this movement, right? Ultimately, if people who don't know the game, when you're using, shorter clubs, when you're in approach shots, using a 50-degree wedge from 80 yards out, there's not a lot of power in the movement. It's likely to not be, putting too much pressure on you from an anatomical perspective, whether that's your lumbar region or otherwise. But as we go up in clubs, when you're trying to hit a driver 290 yards, not only are you swinging it faster, the club is longer, and the movement then becomes larger, right? Both the backswing and the follow through, and there's more going on. So inevitably, injuries do happen, and it seems to be injuries in the same spots, right? It's not like a lot of golfers have turf toe. It's not a lot of golfers who have rotator cuff injuries here and there, but like with the same injuries over and over. So what is going on? What do you believe is maybe a thought in the industry that is improper, and how do we fix some of these injuries moving forward?
All right, for example, so that is a really important question. I spent a year of my life and looked at 869 research papers to write a literature review for my LPGA master thesis. It's available on my website, and for free, I can explain it later, where I looked at every joint in the body and I looked at the epidemiology of injury of each joint. For example, if you take the low back, in any movement, the main injury comes from forward bend, side bend, pelvis rotation, and then hyperextension of the spine in the follow through. So especially there is a thing called you multiply the rotation speed by the side bend, and that is supposed to create even more injury. So can we now work backwards from those injury causing positions and find a way as coaches of the sport and of fitness to avoid those positions? Right?
Yeah. And that's difficult though, right? Because most people think, especially if you're talking to, let's say, like a TPI professional or somebody, being in that side bend position, you get your, let's say, if you're a righty and you're leaning towards your right, your external oblique then starts to be contracted, and that keeps your pelvis and your rib cage kind of tightened, which allows you to not go into, a forward pelvic position, right? What we call extension in golf. And that's a key problem for a lot of amateur golfers, is that they push forward into extension.
So believe me, there are solutions for most injury problems. So if we're talking golf, I would say the biggest failure in the golf swing is that when you address the ball, when you set up to the ball, if you're right-handed, your right side, your shoulder and your waist and your hand is lower simply because you hold the grip lower with the right side, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
At impact, your right side is lower still. That's just how the swing works. So why did you then, at the top of your backswing, raise your entire right side, shoulder, hip, and knee, and lower your lead side, which is your left shoulder, hip, and knee? Why did you do that? And many will say it's because we have to rotate the shoulders around a forward leaning spine. So I will say why. You must first of all ask yourself which are the muscles that you are trying to harness for force production. If you're trying to harness, to my mind, you're not supposed to rotate, you're just supposed to create a stretch of the muscles you need. You don't need that pelvic rotation, which is another story I can go into in detail. But the main thing is, to my mind, you need the muscles you need are your lats, your pecs, your serratus anterior, because you will inevitably have some protraction, and your external obliques of your right side if you're right-handed, and your internals of the left side. Right? Those are all your power producing muscles except for your right side external rotators of the hip. And I have even done one very basic EMG study where it showed that there was really the glute max of the trail side or the right side did not have any much activation in the downswing with an existing swing or the minimalist golf swing that I've developed. There was not much, but I saw that there was a lot of activation with the lats, the pecs, and the external obliques of the trail side. So really you need to, if you want to make a movement that is safer and gives you as good or better performance, then you really need to understand which are your power muscles and how can you move them more effectively. Now, when you talk of your external obliques, for example, in the downswing, that because they have to contract and pull your right side down, the external obliques have have fibers that are more vertical and that are more horizontal. What's to prevent you from positioning yourself at the top of your backswing to stretch the more horizontal fibers and fire those rather than lifting your entire trail side and having to drop your right side down? You also need to understand the motor control aspect, that the brain will always try to use some sort of a tactic or strategy to make it simpler for the body to come down. And the best strategy is gravity. So it wants to really make you come down over the top or find some way to drop you down so that your lifted upper torso, arms, and club can come down to the ball. So there is almost always a way, if you understand the anatomy, the little bit of mechanics that you need to, and the little bit of motor control or how the brain best controls movement, you have to find alternative ways. And I think I found most of them. Again, I reference the paper that's on my website. Most joints, if you keep those joints within their designed ranges of motion, comfortably within those ranges of motion, you don't need to exercise to death. And a lot of people don't want to do that. You need to make changes to your swing, because it is not always your flexibility and mobility that's the problem. You might need the strength for more power, definitely, but sometimes it could be a restriction of your ligaments or even of your joint structure itself. So fitness is not always the key. You need to marry that with better mechanics. And most research that I've read over all my career of reading research says a thing like poor mechanics, but nobody has ever defined what poor mechanics is, because most don't really know, have not studied it in depth enough.
You did a really good job explaining the musculature, and I would say, from pelvis up, what is going on in the difference between a swing that you would recommend as opposed to the average golfer. Can you explain pelvis down? What is the difference between the amount of power or the percentage of effort I'm putting into my trail leg as opposed to my lead leg in a average golfer swing as opposed to your version?
All right. So one of the big things that we talk about, people in golf talk about a lot, is using the ground. So I'm using the ground with my legs almost, they never are exactly like that, as two pillars against the force of which I'm firing my torso, which carries all my big muscles of movement. There will inevitably be some pelvic rotation. Whatever there is will happen from facing away from target in the backswing to facing the ball at impact. It will not be that you will open up your torso to face target, which is creating that big pelvic rotation, which is very difficult for your external rotators from the position you are in at the top of in a typical backswing. So you need to just keep your legs as still as you can, especially not bend that, flex that left lead knee, or lift the trail hip. When you have a tilted pelvis, that's the worst thing you can have because it's difficult to undo. And then people are forcing you these days. The trend is in golf, have any old backswing and then make the match up. That's a very popular term. Make the match up so you produce correct impact, which to my mind is causing all the injury. If you're steep in your backswing, people are telling you just rotate your pelvis more in the downswing. How? Is the pelvis designed for all that rotation? Because the pelvis is stuck in a closed kinetic chain. Your feet are touching the ground and you're not able to move those legs so freely unless you kick in, buckle your uh, lead knee into a sort of a valgus position, maybe lift your lead heel and then change your body levels.
When
Right?
you said,
So
sorry, Kiran, I just want to stick on this point for a second. When you said use your two legs as pillars, do you almost mean as if I'm keeping equal weight? Let's talk about like percentages, like 50% of my weight on my left leg, 50% on my right leg, and I'm never shifting into the trail leg and then back into the lead leg, and I'm swinging around those pillars?
that's a very good question. So, with the swing that I've developed, you don't intentionally shift your weight, your center of mass back at all. But you will have weight shift in the front because what is center of mass? Just moving your arms away from your body in the backswing itself moves just enough center of mass that you will have a forward movement. You don't need the whole entire gigantic body to move back and through like you're, on a dance floor swaying around to the gentle music. And then the other thing is the rotation is, to my mind, more of a stretch of the muscles you plan to contract in a forceful stretch shortening cycle. And the thing that inevitably happens with the swing I've developed, it like caused me a lot of concern because you're going up and down. But now I realize it's a very popular thing of like jumping up and down, changing levels is considered giving yourself more verticals from the ground, right? You naturally tend, because the body has nowhere else to go, you will drop down and push up very naturally. And you certainly don't have to think of any of these things. You just need to be in position where everything you want, your entire wish list of things happens without thinking. Moreover, it's not just the power. With the swing I've developed, you can never ever, if you get it correctly, you can never go left of the fairway, which a lot of the pros do, left of target rather. And even right can be easily controlled once you know how to make the movement. And you get very good trajectory, which a lot of women would like because most women have low trajectory and less distance. So you can correct all these faults if you just know how to reverse engineer movement from whatever ball flight you desire, rather than going historically, what did the shepherds of Scotland do? And now let's add and mix and match without seeing the basis of whether what I'm doing is actually makes sense in science or not.
The swing is obviously very, esoteric. There's a lot of parts to it. It's always been analyzed from the kinesiology standpoint and from the mechanics standpoint. We're going to get back to that in a second, but I just want to go backwards and talk a little bit more about injuries. If there was, a personal trainer again who's working with a golfer, but they're not necessarily golf experts, and their client is coming to them with injuries, what injuries would they potentially be? Maybe this person golfs 5 times a week and is not associating the golf with these injuries, right? They just think, oh, X hurts, Y hurts. I don't know why these things hurt. From a Kiran perspective, it is because of the golf, right? But maybe they're not adding it up. What is going on with somebody who might be overusing particular muscles or in a swing pattern that is causing them injuries? What type of injuries do we expect to see?
So again, I keep repeating that my research paper that I spent a year on literally gives you everything you'd want to know. Which are the most common joints in males, in females, in professionals, in amateurs? You need to read that to understand. Now, the typical joints you see would be low back for men and women. You would have more recently, a parent of a junior elite golfer mentioned to me that the girls have more wrists and shoulder, and the boys have more low back because they swing more forcefully. And the reason I met this gentleman is because I'm doing one of the rare epidemiology studies in golf, looking at elite junior golfers and seeing how much they get injured. When is injury beginning? So the fitness professional is best advised to look at that paper, which gives you a lot of detail, more detail than most people want. And there are there are solutions, that these are the movements that have to be avoided. Then your fitness professional has to have some basic understanding of the golf swing, understand the kinesiology of the movement from an anatomical perspective, as well as a little bit of biomechanics, and then figure out how best they can help their student. They must, in fact, be able to harness the muscles specifically that they want to create movement. And they at least need to ask whether the golfer has pain during or the day after the movement, in which case you could ascribe it to the golf swing. And it need not be that the golf swing has caused the movement. It could also be that the golf swing exacerbates the movement, in which case you still need to make changes in both your fitness training and the golf swing. Understand, take a little history of the movement, look at which are the painful positions, try and elicit the pain. These are things that a fitness person really needs to do. But unfortunately, again, even in fitness, I've done the ACSM personal trainer. When I did my master's, we studied the CSCS textbook. And now in my university where I teach, I've developed a course based on the NASM course book. So nobody exactly, they just give you the theory of the different systems in the body. They give you the theory of how the body works. But how should a coach put it together? So when I did this ACSM certification way back in 2009, I told my son very proudly, look, I have this ACSM certification. And he, being a young man, wanted to develop his chests and his biceps and his pecs and, the usual thing. He said, give me 6 exercises. I said, I cannot even give you one. I don't know where to begin. I don't do those exercises as a woman who's not interested in developing the chest. And I don't know where to begin. There's a disconnect in the theory that we learn in all these certifications and how a person should go about it.
Yeah, don't get me started on that, Kiran. We could be talking here for an hour.
Yes.
I literally wrote a book called "What the Certifications Don't Teach You: Fitness Business 101" because, unfortunately, it's a money grab for a lot of people, and they do teach you, the basic kinesiology and physiology of the body, but as far as programming and putting things together and goals, it's impossible because ultimately you have to work one-on-one with someone and know their specific goals and their body type and all. And it's very intricate, right? You can't just have a blanket program for everybody, whether you're a female or a male, or you're 65 or you're 16, it is going to be different. And the only way to do that is to be thorough and to spend a lot of time one-on-one, but everybody wants a blanket, easy program to tell you, this is how you do it. It's not going to work. Same thing in golf.
But here's what I want to say. I just finished teaching my first introduction to kinesiology course as a general ed course for undergrad majors. And I was very unhappy. I gave them the theory, the raw basics that you really have to know. I said, don't even know the muscles. If it is a flexion of your knee, and if it's an extension of your knee, is it anterior or posterior to joint? Which is the origin? Which is the insertion? Which way is it pulling? Don't even tell me a name, basics. But what I discovered was that I was very unhappy because I was not getting the link. So I had a very nice chat with my friend Claude. And Claude said, what you've done in golf is the actual blueprint that you need for any movement analysis, which is how to reverse engineer it. You figure out the goal. Say you're doing, for example, I did a baseball pitching internship at the famous American Sports Medicine Institute. And there you keep hearing of Tommy John, ulnar collateral ligament injury of your throwing arm. Mm-hmm. But is there no other solution? How much fitness can you make of that elbow? The ligament is basically what's tearing. How much strain can that ligament take? Is there a better way to make the movement that will give you the speed you need without putting that elbow into so much valgus? Right? In my class that I just finished, say, for example, you do a standing broad jump. So I would, because most of my students were student athletes, so they would come up in front. We had a big space for them to move about. I said, okay, make the standing long jump for maximum horizontal distance, which is the goal, right? I said, all right, now make the standing broad jump for maximum height. And you could see the difference. I had 2 athletes, one went far and one went high. Then these were very top basketball players, so they really could demonstrate this. Now I said, we have to figure out what's the difference in the movement, and that's how you begin to figure out. You make different movements and you figure out yourself. You try it on yourself first, because you cannot try it on a patient or a client or fitness client. So you try it on yourself and see, if this is the goal of the movement, this is what I need to be doing different. And there is a way, by simply reverse engineering, you know your goal, and you work backwards from the goal. Where should my body be? Where are my power sources? Where are my injury issues? If you're doing a cut in soccer, girls playing soccer and they get ACL, they cannot take so much, kick in of the knee. So you have to be careful of these things. So now I've realized, and I'm going to work on this. I'm going to make a course soon that will help golf coaches, fitness coaches, any sports coaches to work backwards from what the theory is, which you have to know to a good extent to make the analysis, but how to make a good kinesiological analysis for any movement.
What are your thoughts on TPI, either as a whole, or maybe there's an individual process or technique or concept that you've heard of that they promote that you either think is fantastic or that you disagree with?
So first, I would like to say about TPI that they have the most phenomenal board. If you look at the list, the board of all the different experts, the surgeons and the fitness people and all those people, they are phenomenal. You couldn't get a better list of people. They have somehow picked up bits and pieces from the industry, like how to use ground reaction forces and things like that. And their main belief is you look at the body and you understand what the issues are with the body, and then you fix those issues so that they can make the swing. They say you can have any swing, but your body needs to be able to make it. And I say, no, your body is not designed to make any swing. Your human body was not designed for golf, for instance. It was designed to be hunter-gatherer, run and catch your prey or throw a spear at some creature or pick fruit from trees, right? So it was not designed for all this rotation and jumping and kicking and stuff that people are doing. So, and the other thing is they have correlated their basic screen that they use for the level 1 with certain swing faults. Are those swing faults because of some misperception of what the golfer understood? Like if you tell me to shift weight and I shift too much weight and have what they call a sway, you cannot immediately understand from it that I have some physical limitation, right? So they would really do well to open up their mind to more ideas about what swing ideas work and marry the two, because they have some fabulous power stuff and which are very general. Again, they say the vertical jump is highly correlated with uh, uh, with a more powerful impact and better ball speed. Yeah, so fine, it's correlated, but is that vertical jump necessary and sufficient for creating speed? No, it's not. You know, I could produce a lot of speed with the swing I've developed with being able to do a 6-inch vertical jump. Okay, so yeah, there's lots of reasons why things happen.
Yeah,
they, they
and sorry, just to stay on that point for a second here, because I think it's really important to sort of pound this through. You'll see a lot of these younger golfers who go to a TPI studio and they're showing their force plate production and how it's through the roof. And yeah, he's the furthest driver on the tour. Well, guess what? Phil Mickelson was also driving 300 yards, and I don't think at the age of 39 he couldn't jump 3 inches, right? So the fact that it works for some guys and not other guys should tell you that that's not the reason, right? That is the reason for that individual golfer swing, but that isn't the reason that can translate to every other golfer swing.
Exactly, 100%. I agree with that, because everybody to some extent is different and it is not the cause. The main thing is other people have studied the test, the assessment that they do to correlate with the swing fault. Now, if you're doing an assessment, it has to exactly not even just correlate, but there should be a causation to imply that your fitness limitation is correlated to a swing fault. But there are only about 3 of them that are actually correlated. The other tests are just like fine. And there are no actual solutions being offered swing wise. All you're being told is to improve your stability, mobility, and then your strength and your power. So is that sorting out your problem?
No, certainly not. Yeah. I mean, it's honestly, it's quite the cop out, right? To point out, I mean, imagine you did that in any other area of life, right? You point out a fault. Imagine your financial advisor's like, hey, look, this is all going wrong. You're spending too much money in this area. You don't have enough money in your checking account. The fix is put more money in your checking account. It's like, well, no, you can't just tell me that the power is the solution, right? What are the actual things that I need to be doing? And then also, why does it work for some people and not for other people? Like we just talked about, it just doesn't get talked about enough that we have 40-year-old golfers who are not very strong, or we have even the Ricky Fowlers of the world. Ricky Fowler is like 5'8", 155 pounds, right? And he can hit his 4-iron just as far as anybody else in the PGA Tour who's 6'4", 200 pounds. So, why is this? There's no way he's creating the same amount of ground force production as a Brooks Koepka or some of these bigger guys, a Dustin Johnson, but he's still able to do it. And I do think, we need to look at that. But that might actually, so let's come back to that. Is there a difference in analyzing these professional golfers that we're talking about and the average golfer? And is your swing, the one that you're promoting, and the things that you're promoting in the swing style, more suited to the amateur golfer than it is to the professional, or can it work on all levels?
So my question to you is, do the amateurs and the professionals have the same joints that work through the same planes of motion?
They certainly do.
So that answers your question. If they're human beings.
But here would be my slight pushback, is that the professionals can risk more of their joints because of the risk reward. So if the reward is higher, they can risk these injuries because they have the chance to get their PGA Tour card, where Steve, I don't want to get injured because I'm 16 handicapped. I'm not worried. Like, I just want to get out there and play. But if you're getting that much more production out of these swings that are more back intensive, the Tiger swings, right? Is it worth it for some of these guys to get injured? Or are you saying no, under no circumstances, it's not worth the injury risk because the difference in the level of production that you can get from your swing and their swing is so small? Or is there no difference?
No, so here's what I would say. I can guarantee you that you will be dead straight, which none of the pros are. Under pressure, their swings fail because it's very timing dependent. I can reduce your risk of injury because I don't use those massive ranges of movements, especially of joints that are not designed to have them. And I can guarantee you as much or more distance with excellent trajectories, much better sometimes. So what do you want? You want to take a risk? Go ahead. You can kill yourself. You will never get back, because look at poor Justin Thomas just a few weeks ago. Look at Tiger. Look at who's had his seventh low back. So was it worth the risk to them? How many Will Zalatoris at 26 had to lay off. You will never catch up with the rest of the guys, because when do you make up for all the practice? They are going way ahead of you. When do you make up for the practice? Are those joints now capable of the same movement? Do you dare to move them through the same range of movement? You see, these are all the concerns. Now, you can be 16 and say, I can do what I like. If I stop playing golf, by the time I'm 25, I've made all my money. Fine, try it. You don't know that there is not a better solution for you.
Is the single plane swing that's been made famous by Mo Norman, is that similar to your swing? How would you describe the differences between the Mo Norman single plane swing and the Kiran Kanwar swing?
So, I get asked that all the time, but there are some very good things to Mo Norman, that he never moved that left arm much. But there are a lot of things that are not anatomically sensible. Like, for example, he could do it, as you're always saying, individual. He could do it, but I don't know how many others can do it. At the top of his backswing, for example, I must go back a little bit. TPI is always talking of the 90-90 test to see your external rotation, right? And when you are in a golf posture, that external rotation reduces. Which nobody has looked at, is that when your hands are both on the grip in a closed kinetic chain, and especially when you're dropping your whole lead side, that will reduce even more. You are not going to get external rotation from the movement. So at least get your trail side shoulder retracted as much as possible, which they're not able to do when you drop your lead side and you lift your trail side, unless you push. I now use the arms to get the trail shoulder into maximal retraction. When you're in maximal retraction, you'll have less internal rotation, not none, but less. And you have enough room to come from the inside and not come over the top for any level of golfer.
I guess my question is, seeing this in my mind, with a wood, it seems very simple to me, right? I can see the swing. I've actually, I've watched your swing. I can put this all together anatomically speaking and look at it. When there's not a lot of loft on a club, it seems very simple. When there is a lot of loft on a club, it seems more difficult, right? Because now the positioning Do I need to cup that lead hand? What am I doing to get into the same position with a 60-degree wedge that I am a 3-wood in your swing?
The difference is only the length of the club, how far you stand away from it. The movement is the same. I want the ball position to be centered, which is like people are going to faint in shock when I say that, because I'm trying to push you back into a maximal trail shoulder retraction. If the more forward your hands, the less you're likely to be able to retract. And there is no research proof that a forward ball position is essential. And even for the driver, I can get you plenty of launch angle even without having that forward. When you have the more forward ball position, in fact, you have to side bend or laterally flex a lot more to get the club on an upward angle through impact. There are simpler
Would there
ways
be
to
a lot
do
of
this.
would there be a lot of forward shaft lean to also start the swing?
No. Shaft is centered.
Okay.
Everything is very basic. You don't have to look at over the top. You don't have to look at across the line and laid off. You don't have to, the wrist will automatically get into position. You don't have to look at the grip, because by the time your takeaway is over, you will get into the position of the wrist by what I have you do. You don't need to worry about whether you're weak or strong or whatever in your grip. Most things are taken care of by the way you start your backswing, the takeaway.
Does anybody who is of any measure of fame or fortune use your swing in some respects, even if it's not something that maybe you have taught them, right? Or they learn from you, or they're doing because they think it's anatomically better. They just fell into that. Is there anybody who does any of those movements that you talk about just naturally?
So long drive guys, actually, I would say the person whose swing I consider is the simplest and easiest for somebody like me to convert would be the precedence swing. Forget the big loop that he makes, but really his swing is very basic. He takes his arms back and he doesn't move his torso much. And I think if we were ever amenable to it, I could change his swing in 10 minutes because, he really has a very basic, simple movement. Maybe because of his body type or whatever.
Yeah,
but other than that, sorry.
If you get him as a client, I'm sure
it's downhill
business
from there.
would be set off. Yeah, you know who I was thinking of. You know why I asked that. The most accurate driver of the ball of all time, especially a single season, was a guy named Calvin Peete. And Calvin Peete didn't move his left shoulder off his body, his lead shoulder off his body at all, because he actually had an injury as a young boy that I don't know. I don't know if it was necessarily what the injury was, but it caused him, whether it was post-surgery or just the injury in and of itself with scar tissue, he wasn't able to lift his arm up laterally, and he kept it connected, and the most accurate driver of the ball in any PGA season of all time.
But I'm not talking of arms being connected. I'm talking of body being stable and arms being as free as a butterfly, because you have to get your movement from somewhere. You see, most of your big movers are connecting the torso to the arm. You need to stretch them in your backswing.
Yes.
And it sounds very static when you describe it, but there is ample motion when you look at a swing, especially my recent ones. In the past, I used to have golfers rotate the entire torso and never bothered about the arms, which went very steep and then didn't do anything. Right now, I use the arms just as of a year ago. Have you use your arms to position the torso where I want you to.
If I'm looking at your swing and I'm zoomed in, right? So I have a zoom in, I'm looking at your swing and someone else's swing, and I'm just looking at the shoulders. Can you describe the difference if you're zoomed in on your swing, what's going on in the shoulders versus the average swing?
All right, so they would look the same until you look down at the pelvis, what it's doing. My shoulders would be like 90 degrees backing the target line.
Okay.
But how I get there is very different, and how they are being moved is very different. And the shoulders, most importantly, are level. If I have even a little bit of an inch or so of rise of the right shoulder, it is going to be an over the top move, because that is the simplest default for your motor control system to use. To my mind, the over the top movement is your natural selected movement, which is straight down to the ball. It's very easy for the brain. You use gravity and it's easy. To reroute by dropping your raised torso backwards and then come from the inside, like Rory McIlroy, for instance, does, means that he has to make a big thrust out of his arms towards impact, which he was recently explaining to Tiger Woods. He's found some solution for that, but I wonder how easily that will work. He basically has so much side shift, backward shift, movement of the torso Then he has to sync his arms with the torso, which is not an easy job. Here, because you're just using your arms to move your torso, it's synced from A to Z kind of a thing.
What this reminds me of a lot of what you're talking about is something that I focus on in the fitness industry, Kiran, and that is your goal typically should be anyway in fitness, long-term health and wellness. And you work out at 16 and the 16-year-old has the same goals as your son did. Can I get bigger pecs? Can I have bigger biceps, right? They're not thinking down the road. I understand that. But eventually, whether it's an injury or whether it's a mentor, it does get ingrained into their head to say, you're going to be doing this hopefully until, the end of time here. And you have to make sure that you're working out in a smart manner so that you can be working out to the end of time. And that's the same thing with golf, is that when you're learning to swing it, some kids at 4 years old, it's, 6 years old, 16, whenever it is, and your body can do basically anything to avoid injury just because you're younger, you're more mobile, you're more flexible,
Yes.
you recover faster, right? You're not thinking about down the road, but ultimately golf is the sport that everyone plays the longest, right? You're not playing tackle football at 76. You'll have no problem playing golf at 76. So I think it is important to start to develop swing patterns that you can use for the entirety of your life and perfect that, because what's going to happen is at some point at 50, when you get these injuries, you're going to have to learn a whole new swing pattern. So wouldn't you want to have just ingrained this into yourself when you're younger? That's what I try to tell people in the fitness world, is that, yeah, you're doing these, 350 pound deadlifts, but when you're older and mobility and flexibility are more important and you're not going to recover the same way, these are not the exercises you're going to be doing. You're not going to be moving in one plane of motion with heavy weights. You're going to want to use light weights and move in all planes of motion. So start doing that younger so you ingrain those patterns into your system. And I think that's really the pitch for your swing is, hey, I know you guys might not have injuries now, but it's inevitable. You don't have them at 16. You're going to have them at 60. Avoid them.
That's a very good point. Like poor JT has been making this swing forever. How do you know that you're not the one that's going to be caught in the trap of injury? There are so many factors affecting your injury. And one more thing I wanted to say about the fitness world, when youngsters develop their pecs and their, chests and their biceps, all of them are now, because of the careers being in computer-based things, rounded, and you have a forward head, you're texting all the time. And all this is not only going to affect your golf swing, but affect your life in every possible way. So yes, you have to, when you start young, but the person training you or the person advising you needs the education to know all this. Unless you've gone down the road of how to train a young person better, how would you know where to begin? You have to keep it more reps and lighter, and not overdo until, and why do you do so much strength like the 300-pound deadlift? For what purpose except to look strong and look macho? Is it helping you in any way? Why don't you stay in the strength and endurance spectrum rather than go into the hypertrophy and the excessive lifting? Unless there's a reason for it.
Yeah, I mean, you're preaching to the choir. I mean, that's. I think part of the reason is there is an exhilaration from it, right? So these people they hop on the bench press. And, their goal is to get whatever it is, 300 pounds, and they get it for the first time. And there's an exhilaration you get physiologically from meeting these 1 rep, 2 rep goals that you don't otherwise get from sitting down on a machine and doing, just eight presses. So there's a psychological thrill to this that is imbued in it. But I think another part of this problem here is that, if strength and power is something you want, you can actually get that later on in life. We've proven that. We've seen
exactly.
that. I know 50-year-olds who were stronger at 50 than they were at 25. You know what I don't know, Kiran? I don't know 50-year-olds who are faster than they were at 25, right? So speed is something that goes away from you. So I always tell people that you want to keep those up, right? You want to fire those neurons faster, keep the movements, work faster, but work safer, because that's what you lose. That's really hard to build back up. We can get strong. Strong is easy. But it comes with the times too. There's a cultural aspect to how you look at any given time, right? In the 80s, what we saw in the magazines was different than what we see in the 90s. And then we had the runway models, and now people are back to a different body style. So it'll change back eventually, I'm sure, culturally speaking.
But people are living so much longer, as the research shows. The person who will live to 150 has already been born, right? So given that people are living longer, I teach a course in perspectives in aging and health. So all these are young students coming to me. They look so bored, like they're going to fall asleep at any minute. I say, listen, you guys, listen up. If there's one thing that's inevitable in life, is that will happen to every one of us, is that we will age. You will either age successfully or unsuccessfully. And to age successfully, you have to deposit money in your bank right now so you can pull out your savings when you're old and don't work anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I always use the same monetary analogy. I tell people, when you're young, it's okay to be a little bit more, let's say 80-20 stock to bond heavy in the market, right? You take, your financial advisor says, take some
Yes.
risks, you have the money. And then as you get older, you have to be risk adverse, right? Yeah,
Yes.
that stock to bond ratio tends to switch because you have to go into retirement. That's the same thing with your body, right? You can you could be a little bit riskier, build that muscle at an early age, but at some point, you need to have that aha moment where, unfortunately, it usually happens when people get injured, right? They have to suffer through an injury, including yours truly, until you get to the point where you go, you know what? I might not be able to handle the next injury, right? I got over this one. So let me fix my training style. And that's what you're trying to do, obviously, with the golf swing.
Yes, exactly. And then it's like a case of delayed gratification. Few humans are capable of delaying the gratification of looking good and, getting the dopamine high and whatever. So it's difficult to preach to people who are not converted already.
There was a great book. The name evades me exactly. Something, the other 80% or something to that extent. And it was about this guy who did this longitudinal study on, I think it was LPGA golfers, actually. And that there were a much larger percentage of professionals that were cross-eye dominant, meaning if they were right eye dominant, they were left-handed, left eye dominant, right-handed, as opposed to the average person who, like me, I'm right eye dominant, right-handed. And they were showing that these golfers there seemed to be something to that, right? If that eye is fixated on that ball, that is your lead eye, it's much different. Have you heard of this before? Do you lend any credence to it?
So I heard of it when you asked me about it. I would say that there are three levels of sensory perception: visual, and then vestibular, which is in your inner ear, which feels the balance of your head and neck. And the most important is your proprioception of in your muscles and your joint. Every joint is telling your brain where you are in space. And even if you close your eyes, you still feel it. So your most important feedback system is vestibular, and that is giving you the feedback of where you are, right? So how much the eye dominance helps, I don't know. How many people did he study? The person who's done this is the first question I would ask. Is he able to generalize to all people? And those people, like for me, for example, I'm cross dominant. I'm right-handed, very much right-handed, but my left eye is dominant. Why did I not become a tour player? There are many other factors, right?
Well, you're pretty good, though. You're pretty good.
No, I'm just literally average, and I've made the most of it by understanding the science, by making a study out of it, rather than having some great physical attributes, right? So there are so many factors. Unless you prove a causation, which is very difficult to do, it's merely a correlation. And I think from the synopsis I've read, I cannot say for sure that these people move differently, but in which manner do they move differently? You have to quantify which aspects are they move. I will tell you one thing: in the few left-handed people that I've taught over the years, I find that they naturally tend to swing more flat. Now, I will not say that all left-handed people tend to swing flat, because I've not taught enough. And I'm not sure. I haven't done any study, but this is a feeling. Even their putting stroke will be like a rotary sort of flat thing. So I would not make a claim from that, because I certainly have no idea.
Yeah, I think the way you would do that is simply take a bunch of people at a young age, 4 and 5-year-olds, right? Find out if they're right eye or left eye dominant, and then teach them how to play golf both ways, right? Make them equally every day. Like if you're going out and hitting 10 7-irons on your right hand, and then hit 10 sevens with your left, right? And see if there does become, again, you might just say this is a correlation, but eventually if the numbers are enough, it seems to be causal, right? So if we found out that 87% of these people who were X dominant turned out to be better with one hand, it would lead you to believe, if we control for other variables, that you can find that out. But they didn't do that. Like you said, it's not, they're looking after the fact rather than looking prior to the study.
But to also control the variables is very difficult, because say I have some restrictions on my left side and I try to swing like a left-handed golfer. My swing is not going to be the same for other reasons than even if you train me identically for both left and right, which is also doubtful. How does my brain perceive it differently? The difference is from many things other than your visual dominance, to my mind. And some questions are too complex to ever answer,
Yeah.
even with AI that we have these days.
I like it. Your thinking pattern is, in the best of ways, Kiran, contrarian, and I think I say that as a compliment, because so is mine. Because I you need things to be laid out and proven. You're not just going to believe it because of some sort of, again, relationship that's not causal, but that's correlative, because that's all we see now. And it's really easy to see some high correlative relation and fall in love with that theory and keep chasing it, and only start to see things that add to your theory instead of things that take away, because you're so dyed in the wool. And that's what I see happening a lot in the industry.
And you have such a strong cognitive bias with that idea.
There's this is an interesting thing that happens in Canada, is that a lot of, Canada is primarily a hockey country,
Right.
obviously, right? They're the best hockey players in the world, and that is their sport. And in hockey, shooting is not as important as stick handling, right? It doesn't matter. You'll never be able to score a goal if you can't actually get the puck on your stick, right? So stick handling is more important than shooting. And because most people are righty, it's better for them to have their lead hand in front. So essentially what that means is, in Canada, most people shoot, in America, what we would call lefty, because the stick handling is easier with that lead hand in front, if that makes sense, right?
Lower down. Do you mean lower down on the stick?
Well, so basically, think of a lefty golf club, right? So in a lefty golf club, your right hand is your right palm is supinated down, right? And you're gripping tight, and the left hand's just guiding a little bit, but the right hand is really moving around. So the righties actually learn hockey lefty, because the right hand is what is being used on the stick for stick control.
Right.
So in Canada, they sell basically almost 60-40 golf clubs lefty to righty, because they learn how to play hockey in that manner, because the stick handling is so important. And then it just becomes more natural for them to be standing in that position with their right leg being in front. So I always found that interesting, that in Canada, it's 50-50, 60-40, whatever. In America, it's what, 90-10 or, 85-15, right-handed to left-handed golf clubs. So if you're ever looking for left-handed golf clubs, buy them from Canada. There's a lot more of them. Yeah.
I like that. Yeah, it's nice to try out new ideas and see if they work.
Yeah.
And I think that's the only way forward to progress in any sport. You need to understand the design of the body and the mechanics, and then try out ideas that make sense within those parameters.
This has been great information. Let my listeners know where they can find more about you. Certainly the research paper that we alluded to twice, if they want to reach out to you directly for questions, your social medias, wherever you want to point them to, that's important.
All right. So my website is Your Golf Guru, GURU.com. And you can put /lessons if you want my lesson page. You can just go to the contact button there if you want to get in touch. If you scroll right down to the bottom of the home page, there's a button that says, under research, LPGA master thesis, and it's a 116-page document, but it's really very informative to anyone wanting to understand injury, specifically for golf, but also for the biomechanics is the same. How you get injured, the different tissue gets injured is exactly the same. Then on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn, I'm basically Kiran Kanwar or Kiran Kanwar Golf. They're similar. They've been made at different times, so they don't all exactly match. You can look me up by my name. And on YouTube, it's The Minimalist Golf Swing System. System meaning for full swing and short game. Again, the short game I've designed so that it suits the design of your body. That I do some fun research with my beginner golf classes at the university, Stanton University, where I teach. And we are seeing that there's a difference between the minimalist golf swing and the typical golf movement that people use for full swing and short game.
I will put all the links in the description, from the socials to the website to the direct to the paper. My guest today has been Kiran Kanwar. Thank you so much for joining the Trulyfit Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Steve. It was wonderful. Very exciting to chat with you.